So welcome for co-creation of this evening and for us to come together for this fourth episode on what is the true human nature. Because many of us have these ideas what human nature is about, but it's stuff that we've handed down over and over again from generations to generation to generation, plus the fact that we've been operating on an inverted matrix, inverted way. So in essence, as a child, when you're coming in as a baby or something like that, you have more of your basic human nature components, even though it is only a small glimpse of our true human nature, but there's still some in there, in the sense of the playfulness, the expressional aspect without any of the filters, the imaginative, creative, the very sensorial, tactile type of opening where you want to experiment, learn, touch, taste, smell, and learn how to navigate in a physical form. So there is all of that that comes into the dance and play of what we call life. So yes, it can be amazing, it can be fun, it can be a lot of things, but at the same time, you know, as we're going through life, we're being conditioned, taught, and so forth, what is the proper way, what we call human nature, how we are. So we get to believe and we get to see reflections around us that human nature is violent, is selfish, that is very polarized, disconnected, is about self. It looks at life as a struggle and anything of that nature, and it has to be intense, and it goes into survival mode and so forth. And, you know, there's a lot of books, a lot of information that has been shared for thousands of years about human nature being one way, when really, is it our true human nature? Because look at us. Some of us get connected with doing meditations, starting to connect with ourselves. And when we do, we tend to experience another facet of ourselves. We get to see a lightness, a playfulness, a curiosity, an imaginative part of ourselves. And we also get into a place where, you know, we see life for what it is, a game. And I talked about it in the other workshop, not the workshop, but the other episode, about the playfulness and how we come here to experience life and so forth. But when we're looking at the true human nature, so let's give you a little rundown of what we started to talk about last night, if anybody has missed any of the previous episodes, they are available on several platforms. We have them on Vimeo, we have it on YouTube, we have it on 3 of the Facebook pages, which is basically Advancing Consciousness series. We have it on my own personal page, it's on Kimberly's page, and also my what we call public page and so forth. But so they're all available for replay. So it's a good way to immerse yourself in it. And I would strongly suggest to listen to it more than once, because each time it will expand your consciousness. So I did talk about last night that the planet gets retooled every so often. So when it was retooled last was 15,000 years ago. So when it was retooled, the new seeding of life form as sentient beings and so forth, including the tuning of Gaia, all occurred about 15,000 years ago. When these physicalities were included as part of the experience coming onto the planet, of course it was tuned very specifically for that new retooling process, or that new playground we call Earth, which was the playground in the schoolyard. So at that point in time, we came already programmed. First of all, we used a highlight of 12 different species, okay? 12 different species. We took the highlight of all of that, and that was plugged in. Now, the programming, the master programming, our natural state was also programmed in. So this all occurred about 15,000 years ago, when planet Earth was retooled and the new humans came along, the new versions or series, because it's called a series because we go through different series. So 15,000 years ago, our natural state was very strongly connected, and it was strongly connected to everything that made up what we were made up of. So the first level of connection, it was very connected with the planet and every sentient being on the planet, the energy of the planet, the energy of the solar system, the energy of our own essence of sourceness. Even though we were not expressing sourceness to the fullest, we were expressing a version of that. With that level of connection, we also had our capacities to be able to play and experience life. So basically, we were in a physicality, but the physicality did not have what do you call sub-programmings where we judged feelings and experience. So it's like this level of creation and openness, so that if you even touched a tree, for example, you can feel the energy and you can communicate. There was a beautiful telepathic communication with the tree, and the tree would share its wisdom, its experience, and its connection, and the energy it was able to get from two sources, which was the source coming from Gaia, from its perspective, and the source coming from the sun. This is why all the beautiful leaves and collecting all the sun's rays and the frequency, and then merging both Gaia's energy and so forth to it. And we had a powerful capability to connect with that and to be able to feel it. As we walked underground, we were feeling the energies that were supporting us, elevating us, celebrating with us, through our physical form. So our physical form was like a marriage to the planet. It was a marriage to all creation in that regard. That was our original, what do you call it? Natural operating system. That's how we experience our true nature, as we refer it to. That was how it was, but it didn't stop at that. Because our body was so connected, we can take the energies from our environment, the energies that we felt from Gaia providing and the sun, and we were nurtured. There was no necessity for consumption of food or consumption of any substances to allow us to be able to function. The body did not need food, water, or anything of that nature at that point, because it just took all the energies from all the different sources and it became part of it. It was a beautiful marriage with that. The other thing about our natural state was we were very explorative, very imaginative. There was one thing we had so powerful with the imagination, because when we came here, we had given the opportunity as the designers that put it all together for us, which were some of us were involved directly because we took on the physical form as the first stage to test it out. We had been programmed to such a way where the connection that we had with our environment and everything was so intimate, and so that we learned so clearly from everything around us. The imagination part was because we took on ways to say, okay, I'm going to be a very powerful participant on designing this playground, designing my realities, because the realities were your own reality, and then we had the collective reality, and the collective reality intermingled, it moved through each other and enhanced each other. So it was very key and instrumental to use that creation, because at that point in time we were kind of on a blank slate. I mean, nature was communicating, sharing, and so forth, but what are we going to do with this? How are we going to play with this, right? And of course, we also had programmed within ourselves all the components of sensorial enrichment, so that meaning that we can, you know, not only smell senses, but we could smell further than what we were able to smell now, because we've been, you know, desensitized on so many levels. But the smelling with these aromas of all that was coming in would be vibrational enhancements with us. So those were being part of the receptive part and upgrading our every aspect of ourselves, right? And the other part of the sounds that you can hear, the taste, the smells, the sensorial component and so forth, all of them enhanced ourselves because we were into that. And all of that was taken in, imagination was, expressions and so forth came about. And it was very natural. There was no guidelines of saying you can imagine this and you can't imagine that, get real, do this or do that. None of that were applied, because we were all there to play. Now, our relationship with one another, our natural state with the relationship was cooperation, collaboration. How can we play together? How can we invent together? How can we experience together? How can we sensorially connect? And how can we express with one another? And it wasn't limited to one exclusivity to another. It was very open. But that connection existed on all realms of everything that existed on the planet. So it wasn't from human to human. The whole idea of seeing ourselves as just an isolated singularity in survival mode did not exist at all. So our natural state was flourishing, playfulness, lightness, and wanting to engage and to experiment and experience and so forth. The elements supported us. That was our human nature. And that whole idea of saying that, we had to compare ourselves with one another, it was not the case at all. In fact, there was a celebration of individuality expressions which affected the collective. So in essence, one being a little different than the other was celebrated. Not only celebrated, it was desired, because that's how you created variety. There was no, okay, everybody has to look the same, act the same, create some rules that everybody plays together with. None of that was required, because everybody worked in harmony. Everybody was supportive, but expressive in the same way. We did have emotions. Emotions were part of our experience, but emotions were not controlling us like it does now. Our emotions drive us. Our emotions steps into the driver's seat. Emotions at that point in time emotions were the sensorial engagement of whatever we were experiencing. So emotions elevated, and the emotions of joy and excitement and adventure and playfulness and just exuberance was very, very enlightened within ourselves. And the fact of emotions feeling anything of that nature, none of it ever took the driver's seat. It was just an enhancement. The same thing, the emotions were not polarized. There wasn't a good emotion, a bad emotion. It was just an emotion. It was just a feeling of whatever that was. And the whole idea of sadness and stuff like that didn't even exist, because it wasn't something as a reference point. We didn't even have rules at that point in time, in the sense of saying, well, this is acceptable, not acceptable, because in essence, there was an ethic and a standard where you would never violate another aspect of you, because you saw each person as an extension of you. You saw each person as another part of your lineage, your connection, because you were on the planet to play together. We didn't come here as a singular, because if that was the case, you would have been here alone at that time. But it wasn't the case. We came here, and the more that it joined us, more that came in, were enhancing the game. So the human entities that were involved, as I explained before, the human entities that were involved at the time were very new. So it was very receptive to learn how to take the sourceness essence of consciousness and the physical essence of consciousness and create a balance. So it was learning how to be a reference point of a human, so that it would record the experiences, so whenever it did reincarnate, it could take over from that, saying, okay, it's an extension, I'm going to now take on a physicality. So it was very, very receptive to learn and to take every sensorial experience. With that also, the souls that were coming in, of course, at that point in time, either some of these souls were on the planet before, from, say, the time of Atlantis or beyond, the Lemurians and so forth, and different species that were on the planet before, and the species, of course, that were here before were in different shapes and forms and so forth, sizes. There's been giants, and there's been smaller ones and so forth, different forms and whatever. But, that wasn't a carryover because it was new, but the souls had been there. So the souls are bringing those experiences. The souls were bringing experiences from other planets, experiences from other dimensions, and so forth. And we're coming into these physicalities, and really the playground of Earth was just like this amazing playground because of all that it had to offer. It was just absolutely a glorious place to come and play. So in essence, even the sentient beings, what we refer to now, which requires or has had a food chain, and the fact that you had to protect yourself from the environment, protect yourself from the plant life, and protect ourselves from the oceanic life and the insect life and the animal life and so forth, birds and whatever, that didn't exist because everything was in harmony. So you would be able to go into nature and be fully exposed in the sense of not having any protective gear or anything of that nature, and can sleep there because nothing would harm you, nothing was against you, everything was harmonized. So you would be able to communicate. And the insects that we have now that have been sort of, the pests in a sense because of the fact that they do like to bite us and do other things and create exit points for us in some cases, that was not in the original design. That was never there. So our natural state was harmony with every aspect of ourself. The other thing too is because at that point in time we had our 12 DNA strands, so the 12 different species were 12 DNA strands, were active. We were very connected with the species that each of these DNAs represented because the DNAs were transmitters, receivers. So we weren't only experiencing planet Earth, we were experiencing these other types of physicalities that were communicating with us, and we were communicating back with them so that we would actually advance even further. So the whole idea to have those 12 DNA strands or those 12 connection points was so that we as a human species would advance very profoundly and be able to go into our operating system, because our design of the planet was designed to start off with organic 3D to 9D, as I've spoken before at the time. So how do we move much more quickly? So there was never, the natural design was never for us to be in struggle or anything of that nature. It was always self-exploration, self-expression, and going through all the processes of connecting. So each of the DNA strands were communication, and so we were getting 12 different inputs of experiences that were experienced on different physicalities, on different planets, and then we were also sharing. So that was moving us back and forth. So that connection was there. So the fact of beings from any of the 12 different species that were contributors, we had also the very strong connection. Whenever they appeared on the planet, which they were at the time, we would have a really powerful connection in the sense of telepathic communication. There was no language barrier, because for the first 5,000 years, we did not use language that much. It was something that was not experienced. Sound came out, but it was not. It was more the communication between one another. There was no misinterpretation. It was a very clear communication which each individual would be able to utilize. So, because that was kind of a thing that got programmed within us. That's why we have that telepathic capacities to be able to do that. Now, of course, a lot of it got turned off. So in our true natural state at that point in time, our true human nature, the creating of an environment, of any community, group, and environment, always took the point of looking for the best interests for everybody involved. So you would not create something that was individualized for you at the compromisation of anybody else. So the idea of what we hear that, for us to get paid to do something, or the fact that we have to take care of ourselves and really don't consider anybody else, was never our natural state. It's never been that. That's not our true nature. Our true nature was at that point in time, how can we work together? And how can I be a contributor to create an environment that all of us flourish? All of us are in ease. All of us are in play. All of us are sharing with one another. So the idea comes to the fact is like, okay, if there's no motivator to how could I say, motivator for us to do something. Like now we have motivators of survival and money and so forth. So we go do jobs and things of that nature. That's not our natural state. Our natural state was we felt compelled to share, compelled to bring our gifts and our expressions to the communities, to the groups, to the planet. And it was an exuberance that was coming through us, an excitement that was coming through us. It's like, okay, let me get in there. What can I contribute? This is what I love to do. And then you just share it freely because everything was freely. And there was never a sense of lack, because as soon as you saw something was not balanced or anything of that nature, you would work as a team to make sure all of it was there. So to look at a planet where you had the haves and have-nots, that was not in existence in our true nature. Our true nature is for us to be, and I'm not, when I say even, it's all of us to have full capacities to do whatever we came here to do without the distractions, without all the different rules. So in fact, the choice was still available. Do I participate or not participate? But it was free in the sense of you had the choice. It's not like you were forced to do anything. But when that was taking place at that period of time and the years after that for another 5,000 years, that was never a concern because all of it was working in harmony in that sense. So everything was coming along with that way. And this is why we're starting to feel the sense of this oneness, because it's not about separation or anything, because at that point in our natural state, there was no such thing as separation. And everybody was enhancing each other. So the sharing also involved the sharing of consciousness, of wisdom and awareness, because everybody had a uniqueness about themselves, because every soul was unique in itself. Every soul had a very specific signature. Every soul had been on different planets, so they're bringing their uniqueness. How can we bring this uniqueness? How could we utilize this, share it amongst each other, and everybody starts to experience it in our physical form and upgrade the physical form, upgrade the planet dance, or what we call the playground schoolyard, and use all of that as part of what we are doing together. So that was the whole motive of all of that. And it allowed us to be able to fully experience third dimensional consciousness, and then go to fourth, and then fifth, and sixth, and seventh, and ninth, and so forth. Now, left into that true design without any modification that occurred later on, we right now would have been in seventh dimensional consciousness on planet Earth. That would have been our home residence at this point in time as a collective. We wouldn't have had the 2D, inverted 3D, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D anymore. We would be already harmonized as a collective at seventh dimensional consciousness. Okay, so we say, well, here we go. We got sidetracked or something of that nature. But is it? We just had a different experience. So when we're looking at human nature, when we are going through this transformation, we're getting tastes of it. We're starting to get a feel for it. This is why some of the community stuff is coming into place and people wanting to work together and so forth to create an environment. That's a taste of it. The animal kingdom is starting to change too, because you're seeing animals that would never be, and I'm talking about now, not 15,000 years ago, because there's a lot of species that weren't even here when the original design was, and a lot of them got brought in later. But other ones that were here are no longer here. But at that point, when we're looking at the way things are right now, the animal kingdom has a food chain, which did not occur, was not designed because there was not eating of one animal eats the other and so forth. It was really, the animals would actually get the same energy directly from the sun, the air, the water, and all of the expressions of its connection to the planet. But it would at times, because we all had digestive systems, would munch on branches and things of that nature. And so the hydrochloric acid and whatever else that they had in their system was for plant life, was for branches, for other things that it wanted to have that sensorial experience, including humans. Humans did not need to eat, but it had a system that would basically was designed to consume fruit. But our connection to food was not the food addiction that we experience now, or the fact that we base all our pleasures on food, and that the fact we live to eat instead of eat to live. Or, it just became that we had to live so that we can eat, so that we can survive and all that. That didn't exist. So whenever you wanted to have an intimate connection with the plant life, you would eat a fruit. That's what our system is designed for and always has been designed. And of course, it modified a little bit more because it was forced with programs to come in and consume a food chain of some sort. So our natural human state or human, or our nature, whatever you want to call it, that part of us, is coming back into online. So that's why a lot of the people are starting to feel that their diets are changing, their connections are changing, the way they feel about things are changing and so forth, because we're going back to that natural state. Now, what changed it all was about 5,000 years later, and that was about 10,000 years ago. So 10,000 years ago, there was a modification again. Now, this modification was done by a different group. So the 15,000 years ago, for that 5,000 years time span, was the original design. That was the design that was put into place when planet Earth was retooled. And everything I've been describing up to this point in time was in effect for those 5,000 years. Then, later on, at 10,000 year point, there was a series of species that came on, well, two specific, taking turns, and had come in and said, okay, let's create an environment of creating something that is highly challenging and to create a separation. Now, there was twofold intent behind that. The intent was, yes, can we push it to the point where they do not evolve and see what they can do? That was the playful part. The other part was, okay, let's keep them at a lower state so that we can feed off it. We can create a program that we can feed off, or what we call this polarized. Because polarization, separation, all of that, it did exist prior to planet Earth as an experiment that was being done on different planets and so forth. And certain species really loved it and decided to go on and plant it on other planets. So when the 10,000 year mark came in, they came in and they modified the operating system. Now this had what you call the organic matrix. And I did explain the matrix part, and I will get into more details at some point. The matrix part is the main operating system, and then our own operating system existed also so that we would be able to match all of that. You had a question?
Yeah. Hold on.
I could have.
I just wanted to know
Continue.
if we had a crystalline structure back then too.
Yes, go ahead.
Did we have a crystalline structure back then as well?
Yes, we did. Actually, the crystalline part was put in 15,000 years ago. It was modified here. Now, I'll explain why. Because the crystalline state basically carried a much larger spectrum of information, light, codes, and ways of communication with the 12 DNA strands, which were the 12 different contributor species and the 12 different connections. So at that point, the first 5,000 years, our body was more crystalline. It carried much more light. It carried a much more flexibility in the sense that things moved a lot quicker, so you can experience things a lot quicker in and out. There was no attachments either. There was no reflecting of the past, because in our natural state, in our true human natural state, we do not carry the past. We do not carry labels. It's like this. You plug in an experience, you go full into the experience. Once you're done with the experience, it's unplugged. It's gone. It's completely off. We're not playing with it any longer. Because there was an understanding that you're living the moment. You're living, creating new moments. And in those new moments, you were able to express more, to experience more, to really plug in any part of the experience. So at that point in time, that was very reflective. So it was very crystalline. Then when the 10,000 came, then the moon got brought in, which was really a hollowed out planet that became a satellite. That's what it was. The moon was brought into place. Then a new operating system got put in which we call the inverted matrix. The inverted matrix was brought in, where everything worked backwards. But this was not enough. So what happened is they went in and modified. Now this was all offered. And the souls involved at that point in time said, okay, this is temporary. We could try it out, see how it goes. And it makes it a little bit more challenging. We're up for this, for the game, the experience, and so forth. So for this inverted matrix to operate, we had to actually come offline. So meaning that we had to disconnect from the organic matrix because the organic matrix was online. What does that mean, online? Online means that the matrices were connected to other matrices within the galaxy, and it would share information. So it wasn't only our DNAs that were receiving information from different species, but we're getting planetary playground operating system upgrades. So it's like us having an operating system, and the operating system would be upgraded constantly, to reflect what the galaxy was experiencing, because we were part of the galaxy and part of the universe. So we were getting two streams of upgrades. So the organic matrix kept getting its upgrades and was increasing in its capacities and so forth. Well, if we have this coming in, this is going to be a problem. So the inverted matrix basically became what replaced, or became offline, the organic matrix. It stayed there, it was still available and still upgrading, but we weren't so much connected. And then we were connected to the inverted matrix. Now, the thing about the inverted matrix, it was a closed loop. So the inverted matrix was not live to any other planet or any other solar system, any other clusters in the galaxy or in the universe. It worked independently. So the big computer was in the moon, but the inverted matrix itself was a closed loop, meaning that whoever was playing with this matrix were the programmers, and basically programmed how we would connect with life, and do it in that fashion where we no longer were left as self-expressions fully, very minimal expression. But that didn't work enough. So the thing is, we're still getting 12 different channels of communication. That has to be cut off too. So what happened? Out of those 12 DNAs that were active, 10 of them, 10 of these were off, turned off. That's a 0, or no. Were turned off. And the two remaining ones were tuned down, so it was filtered, so that we would only get little dribbles of it, or what we call miniature streaming, trickling of it, right? So that our reliance or our connection to these different species, DNA communication, was no longer the same. And then we had this inverted matrix, so our reliance went into the inverted matrix, but it didn't stop there. We had another thing, an operating system that was installed in our mind, which we called the ego mind, the small mind. But the ego mind was a direct program that reflected with the inverted matrix. So that came online for us. So the operating system that it got modified to now created all this polarized aspect of it. So it basically created separation. Separation from everything around us, so that we actually became islands in the ocean, sort of thing. We're still surrounded by the field and everything else, but we felt isolated with this operating system that was streaming to us. So this is how polarization and separation came into play. And this is why we started to see each other no longer as a partner, as a someone that we would connect with and share with and so forth, but we saw them as an opposition. We saw them as a separate entity that we need to either compete or to somehow be better than them or something of that nature, or the fact that we had to be careful for them because in essence they wanted to, take over whatever it is. And all of this harmony, connection, and so forth started to drift away. And then we started to go into what we call survival mode. And then the roles started coming in of polarization, which is victim-victimizer, and then different ones playing different roles came into place, and then survival came in. So part of the operating system, because we got isolated with all of that, all of a sudden we're not getting energy from the sun directly anymore, so we now had to eat food, and at that point it was fruit, so we had now relied on fruit as a sustenance, because what does fruit do? Fruit grows on a tree or grows on a plant, and when it grows, okay, it's basically packaging sunlight, energy from the planet, the soil, and from the air and the water. And then we were eating like a mediator. So what I mean by a mediator is now we're not taking it directly. We had to eat something that would actually take it directly, and then of course we were eating that part of it. So that was the first stage of it. So this is where we started to all of a sudden requiring to eat. We required, and then of course the environment changed. When the inverted matrix came in and all of the other modification, all of a sudden the temperature swings and the way the planet worked changed. So that now we had to protect ourselves to the elements. Introduced different species of insects and different species of animals, and reprogrammed the animals so that now a food chain existed. Now from their regular way of existence went into this other. So this survival of the fittest became more and more of a prevalent operating system because it was being reflected in the environment. And then, of course, the changes in the climate, and the climate started to now go in huge swings, because if we actually had recordings of prior to the 10,000 years, you would have noticed that if they took any samples, that it was consistent. Now, of course, we weren't staying in the northern parts because there were still some hot and cold certain areas, but the swings of temperature and everything else was very minimal in comparison to what we were experiencing before. And even the way the planets were, and how the planet and everything else absorbed the sun and used that as energy also changed. So all of that occurred in about 10,000 years ago, because even the scientists, when they start looking back, Greg Braden was one of them that had talked about this some years ago, that when they looked back, anything before 10,000 years ago, there was no weaponry. There was no walls and fortresses or anything that even remotely resembled any violence. There were no mass deaths. There was no mass graves, if you want to call it that. They didn't see anything that reflected anything of any form of violence or mass exits in any way on a physical plane. Any of that, because it didn't exist, because at that time there was all this harmony that existed. And even at different stages when the planet was retooled, that go back even further, because the planet's been around a long, long time, but it gets retooled. There was none of that. It was only from 10,000 years ago till now that we have, been still playing out with this modified operating system. Now, the ego itself was the AI that got installed in our brain to be able to interpret the inverted matrix and take the instructions of the inverted matrix and to create a distraction and also an operating system. So our natural state is to flourish, to expand, to grow, to become a grander aspect of self, and to move through the dimensional states of consciousness, the 3D and all the way to 9D, and now going to 12D, which is the latest upgrade. Those are states of consciousness that we internalize and utilize as an expression on a physical form. So it's basically, and each of these dimensional aspects are closer and closer connection to source essence recognition, knowing that we are source and we're free, we're playing, and we're doing whatever we're doing. So without all of that coming in, I think you had a question?
Yeah, one just came in. Was it Draco who altered our DNA? What about the Anunnaki? Who altered our DNA?
Yes, well, we had several, okay, along the way. So the original one was 10,000. So there was a reptilian, draconian, and Anunnaki, I think it was, that were involved. But we had a few other modifications along the way. The last one was 1,500 years ago. The other one before that was 3,500 years ago, and the one before that was 5,000 years ago, and the original was 10,000 years ago. So each time there was an upgrade because there was a slippage going on. And what I meant by slippage, the energies that were coming in were also stimulating inconsistency with the operating system, because the operating system would start to break down because we were starting to gain more consciousness. So what the inverted matrix did with the what we call the ego, artificial intelligence, with the operating system intact, it was about actually taking us from organic 3D state that was our starting point, was to actually take us to two other layers, which one was 2D and inverted 3D. As you can see, I've mastered writing backwards there to refer the inverted 3D. So what it was is going down this way. The inverted 3D meant that everything was backwards. In 2D, you actually don't even know it's backwards. But in 3D, you were aware it's backwards, but you kind of played the game backwards. So anything was real was made false, and everything false made real. Sorry.
Did you say the groups who altered the DNA?
Altered it? Yes. Yes. Okay. Say it again?
Yeah.
Well, we had the Draconians, which were a reptilian race, which were hybrids. You have to understand that the natural reptilians are very, I don't want to get into this too much, but they have continued to evolve. It's not that they weren't evolving. The same thing with the Anunnakis that were involved, that it was the hybrid versions of it that decided that they were going to maintain the polarization and wanted to feed off the polarization for a period of time. Because from a universal state, being the universe, there were still places that were open to that, so that they were kind of the engineers that re-engineered things to go backwards, sort of thing. Okay, and to hold a very low frequency. So like the movie The Matrix, you know, it talks about, you know, how the matrix makes us into the battery. And what's the battery? The battery is low frequency, because everything is increasing in frequency. For them to exist and to continue to support and play, it needed the opposite. So that's why when we are going into anger, fear, and battle of some sort, or victimizer and all of that, that's very low frequency, and that's where we're feeding still that, you know, inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D energies. Okay, so that came into place. Now, was any of that our natural state? No, we still have a natural state within ourselves. Our natural human nature, our true human nature, is still very active in us, but all the layers and layers and layers of everything else that we've taken on from generation to generation to generation, we actually have stifled all of that. Even though now it's creeping up and it's trying to come through, all of it was stifled with all of this in place. So we had the 2D inverted 3D very active for pretty well 10,000 years. It's just now the moon was deactivated, okay? Full deactivation happened back last year, and then the inverted matrix got finally fully unplugged on the 21st, 22nd of December 2019. Now, but we're still experiencing 2D and inverted 3D, even though we had created two different playgrounds. The original playground, which was the original design, was, was now, this marker here is starting to go here, 5D. So the 5D, fifth dimensional consciousness, so the planet itself is emanating that. However, there was a lot of souls that basically, souls, physicalities, human entities that had not finished the journey and really never got to experience the organic 3D and said, okay, I'm good to let go of the 2D and the inverted 3D, but we need to experience a little bit of the 3D before we're prepared to go to 5D. So there was a new design that was put in, and as a parallel Earth that was overlay, identical, and I won't get into that because we'll talk about all that other stuff on another episode. But there was an identical planet that was created that is very carefully linked that has organic. Now, these are both organic 5D and organic 3D. So this organic 3D is the original design, which was applied 15,000 years ago with upgrades. So that's what this is. So we have the opportunity to experience that. We can jump back and forth. Not everybody does that. Some people do. Others decided to make that as their home plane for a period of time. And others have decided to make 5D home plane, but they could visit 3D. And the 3D can just get a glimpse of the 5D part of it. Now, the difference between the two, and I've explained it in workshops and so forth, so I won't get into too much details. But the difference between the two is how much the physicality is the main reference point of your existence. So the 3D, as organic as it was, it puts a little bit more focus on having a human experience in its elevated state, where the 5D has the human experience, but it likes more of the spiritual component, or the basically source component plugged in. And as I said, the further you go into the dimensionals, it's more sourceness involved in any creation and experience. You had something to say? Go ahead.
Was the manipulation a collective consciousness agreement?
Well, no, originally it was not. So what happened is the group came along and saw planet Earth and saw what it was able to do and what it meant, because planet Earth has a very specific design. And it was the hub, and I know I talked about it before, but it was the hub of that quadrant of the galaxy. So it was very influential. And it was also very experimental because it basically had taken on a physicality that had all these different inputs. And also the planet was quite original because in a sense it was designed to be able to self-evolve. That means the planet would evolve as the collective would evolve. So it was selected by these modifiers, we'll call it that. They selected the place. When they came in, they presented it to the collective that this is what our intent is. And our intent is to make the playground much more challenging. In fact, so challenging that if you get through this, you will achieve a new pinnacle of enlightenment. Okay? Because it's like somebody coming into your home and offering to you the opportunity to take your video game and make it super challenging, super intense, so that the fact is it becomes, you have to use more of your capacities to be able to get through the different levels and even to complete the game. So that's how it was offered. It was offered, yes, you're going to truly forget who you are. You're going to actually no longer be sustained in the same way, where you have to actually self-regulate. You're no longer in cooperation. You're going to be experiencing yourself in different stages of disconnect. But the point is to reconnect and to bring yourself back to the original design, but much more skilled and rich. So it was presented, and the way it was presented may have looked at deceptive at the time, but at the same time, the collective felt, okay, a challenge is a challenge, an experience is an experience, and we're okay with that. So it was absorbed. So was it shoved down your throat? No. Was it some of us involved in it? Yes, because some of our souls that have been here were there. Definitely some of the human entities that are presently right now. Well, as a matter of fact, all of them had some say in the matter at the time, the human entity aspect, because the human entities were created in 15,000 years and always stayed the same. You know, they were just evolving with what the experience was. So yes, certain parts of you, physically, human entity-wise, in some cases soul-wise, were involved in that. time when that offer was made. So when it was plugged in, not really fully realizing how deep it was and how intense it was going to be, the ride. Now, we got to look at it two ways, or we have two options to look at it that way. You say, well, we've been deceived and blah, blah, now we got to bring law and order back and restore everything. And yeah, that would be what the inverted 3D and 2D would say, and what the inverted matrix would project, because that's the best thing to do, is show that those were the horrible ones that actually did this to us, and now, we've been suffering through all of this. That's that perspective. But the true perspective is, okay, yeah, we signed up for it, we experienced it, we're there, we've got into the depth of it, we got to see how far we can go, we've had such an amazing opportunity for all of this. And now we're giving ourselves another opportunity, which, has been offered to us at this point in time. Say, okay, restoration of back to the organic operating system. And we're going to do it in stages. So really, this transformation that we're going through now started in 1987 when we had the convergence from 86 to 87. And then we had another convergence around 2012, and we had the end of 2012 going into 2013, and then we had another convergence or another modification now in 2020, which was at the end of 2019 going into 2020. So this is where we are, okay? So we've gone through the next stage. And the offering at that point in time, which got offered in the middle of the year, the end of August going into September, actually, in the middle of September, we were offered the opportunity to have two different platforms and playgrounds. So basically, the Organic 3D is a playground that's made available for us to utilize for a period of time up to 15 years. So you can be there as long as you choose, but you have to be done by 15 years. We're also given the opportunity to be able to purge this in our operating system. Where we're purging it. We're purging it from the ego. So we're purging the ego. We're also purging the subconscious mind, because the storage of all of our experiences in our subconscious mind, the bulk of it is, the inverted stuff that we've been living all this time. Even if you looked at your current time right now, how you're experiencing life right now, that is still very much so all of that design that was in the inverted matrix. So if you look at all our systems, you're looking at still a reflection of the inverted matrix. So what we're doing right now, as we're going through that, we're purging all of that part. And we have 3 years. We gifted ourselves 3 years to be able to clear that part out. So in 3 years, we need to have purged the inverted matrix out of our system, ego and all, and purging all the memories and so forth that were created, all the different labels and everything that were created in 2D, inverted 3D, so that we can start to focus on integrating an organic 3D and organic 5D. Now, the 3D planet has been designed to be a maximum, like I said, 15 years. After that, and that can be from 1 year to 15 years, after that, all this will merge, and basically you would have only the 5D version of the planet, because they'll merge. Okay? If any souls don't want to be participating, they'll leave. So there's probably going to be some exiting and whatever else, or swapping and so forth. So we will go into the organic 5D, and then we're given 5 years, and I will explain something in a minute, 5 years to have all of this to integrate, so that by 2040, for us to be fully integrated, every single participant that's chose to stick around to be fully integrated into 5D. Okay? So our world will reflect more and more the 5D or fifth dimensional consciousness. Now, that would mean a lot of the systems that we have in place right now will become obsolete and taken out of the equation. This whole thing about money and all of that stuff will have faded. It will be just kind of a memory or an archivic look back and saying, oh, well, look at that. We used to do that, whatever it was. Because then we're going back to that collaboration, creating an environment that's flourishing for everyone. This whole idea of haves and have-nots will no longer be there. All the stories, programs, belief systems, and everything that we've adopted and so forth would have purged by then. And then we really are a community. And the communities are going to be in satellite types communities. So basically, your communities in your area, which will interchange time to time, and the community expands to larger community. And then the final community would be the planet Earth. Well, I say final being on planet Earth. But then by this time, we will also have more visitation from our brother-sister souls that have been showing up in ships and so forth for quite some time. And they've been involved in a lot along this period of time. Just to throw something in there, a lot of times people talk about, these gods and, who's God, who's this, and so forth. Well, there's no deity of whatsoever, any way, shape, or form that exists. And you could throw that throw it away if you don't want to acknowledge that. That's fine, no problem. But most of the so-called gods that were labeled as gods at that time were basically aliens that were coming in ships and so forth. And because at that time, with the level of consciousness and understanding, especially at the times after the modification occurred, they were seemed to be seen as superior because, they can materialize, they can read our mind, they can fly and do all of these things. And basically we can't do that, so they must be gods. And then they were giving off rules and whatever else because they were the modifiers. Because realistically, who are these engineers? Who are the designers? Who are the ones that actually do the program? They're another version of you that have much more elaborate or aware state of physical creation or engineering experience. Soul-wise, they're pretty similar. But what they've learned and experienced through their various entities and so forth, they had certain capacities of technologies but we've been in those bodies. We've been in and out and everything. So whatever we've experienced, it's not like there's anything more or less. Now, I did say that we were given these times. These times were given us as an agreement that we've agreed, but we also have brother-sister souls that have been working very closely to us to assist us to get on track. Not to take away any of our experiences, but to give us the opportunity to kind of have different playgrounds. So some of the engineers involved in this time frame, which my soul happens to be one of them, that has come here to assist with all this transition, was also participating, and I'm not talking Franco, I'm talking the soul, participating in some of this orchestration of saying, okay, what are we going to put in as a transitional point? So if we're going to go from one stage to another. See, there is no savior idea, mentality, or I'm going to come in and take away, your toys or take away your experience. That's not ever going to be the case. The idea that, a return of any form of consciousness, like Christ consciousness and stuff like that, is really the consciousness of reactivating that consciousness. It's not there's a deity coming along or some spiritual being that's coming along and say, okay, I'm now going on the throne, I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to set the record straight. Or we're going to have these alien beings coming in here and say, well, we're going to fix things because, you guys have been messed up and you're not big enough, strong enough, wise enough, and to be able to not fix things, but transform things and change things and upgrade things, so we need to come and do it. No, they only did, help us with some of the arrangements of creating the platforms, removing some of the components. Like the inverted matrix, we were participating because we basically said we no longer want to play with that. So they facilitated us in that respect by helping it unplug, and also the satellite being the moon itself now has been turned off in its original transmission. So you'll notice the effects of the moon when you have a full moon is quite a bit different. It's way milder. A lot of it is just memory that is stored in the physicality and in our operating system that would react, oh, it's the full moon. But in essence, you will notice that the same power that it had and how we would affect emotions and affect the energies and the growing cycles and so forth is not. So the consistency is balancing out because of that. So, going back to what is our true human nature, did you have a question to ask? Go ahead before I carry on.
Couple.
Okay.
Is the intellect still active in 5D?
Is the intellect?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that would be mean figuring things out by our minds as opposed to our hearts.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, the thing is, right now we made the intellect, the mind, superior. Okay, and with the disconnection to the communication that the body is sharing. So, remember the connection points that I talked about, where the body communicates to your right brain. Sorry, the right hemisphere of your brain that makes up the mind. Okay, so it communicates. The human entity communicates to the right brain. Your soul communicates with the right brain, and the intuitive part that comes in from the connection to other species and other beings that come in through your third eye all go into the right brain, and then any source consciousness goes into the right brain, which basically processes all of that and then shifts it into the left brain, which creates the reality on the exposure. The analytical aspect of it, what basically did is, and that was part of the modification, it was this disconnection. And that was a good point. Thank you for that question, because the further disconnection that occurred with part of the, not only disconnecting with each other, we've disconnected from ourselves. So what does that mean? That we were not communicating with our body anymore. The body just created sensorial experiences, and then we labeled it as good or bad or whatever it is. Our human entity was communicating. We've disconnected from that, so we weren't getting what we call gut feel or intuitive part that comes from the human entity part. And then we didn't have the heart communication, which is the soul part. And then, of course, the third eye, we kind of try to block it out as much as possible. And source essence, well, that doesn't exist. So the analytical part became the main threshold. But what does the analytical part work? If you're not taking any other resources of consciousness streaming it, it's all program based. So now the mind becomes program based completely, 100%. So now everything has to has to calculate and has to function, in a sense, a certain way. So really, the changes that we're going in is the reconnection to our body, reconnection to our human entity, reconnection to our soul, and reconnection to our third eye, reconnection to source essence around us. So now we're getting all of these inputs going into the right brain, transmitted to the left brain. So the mind's consciousness now expands. And it now has many more resource points and many more opportunities to express and experience itself. So it's not only calculated by formula and programs, and now it's using many, many other inputs of experiences, and now used as you're still process and saying, okay, how could I plug this in this human experience? How could I plug it into my reality? How can I project a reality on my screen to experience life? So that is shifting too. So you'll find that you'll be, more intuitive, more connected. You now can communicate more with your body, and the body will communicate more, every part of it, because we're opening the channel for that. You had a second question, right?
Yeah. Would you say a word about the Greys? Organic future us or a form of AI?
Run that by me again. See it again?
It says, would you say a word about the Greys?
Uh-huh.
Organic future us or a form of AI? So I'm thinking that perhaps he's wondering if the Greys are an organic future us, or a form of AI.
There's both. Okay, so the original organic Greys are a species that reflects a lot of our advancements. So is it a future us? Not quite a future us, but represents a future expression of what we are capable of and the way that we would do things. Now, the thing about human physicalities and human projection at this point, it has such a blend, because the Greys are one of the DNA strands that are within us. The organic reptilians are part of it, the organic Pleiadians, and so forth. The artificial intelligent one, or the AI, which we call the hybrid greys. The hybrid greys were a modified grey, which basically did not advance, and their purpose was to operate in a less conscious state. Now, the only reason that they're still around and still playing a particular role, and now as much as they're not interfering with our progress, because they've kind of been quarantined in a sense, but we still have a lot of those communication connections type of thing going on, that with all of that taking place, what we're looking at is that the way that we experience things would be a compilation of all of that coming into place. So we can't say, well, they represent a part of us in the future if it's organic. If it's the hybrid, no. It shows us the past, which is it shows us what happened for the 10,000 year period that we've been experiencing. Our relationships with different, what we call different species of aliens or ETs or whatever you want to call it. Galactic friends. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Our galactic friends. Our relationship will not be the same way it is now, where we have been operating, because our relationship for the first 5,000 years, they're our friends, they're our pals, they're just in a different form. We can communicate with them. We had a real good connection because we were learning from each other. So we're going to go back to that. So the 10,000 year modification part now is breaking down. So our communication and connection with them will upgrade accordingly. So this is kind of what we're looking at in that regards. I was going to say something else, and it slipped my mind. Was there any other inquiry, question, or anything that you wanted to share before
No, there is another question.
before I bring back what I was going to say next?
What level of importance does food play in organic 3D and 5D? How will the form of the physical body change, if at all, in 3D and 5D?
Okay, in the organic state, we'll find that the dependency on food will change. So we will need less and less and less. Eventually, when we tune into the highest form of organic 3D and 5D, you won't require the food. You will still can enjoy it. Now, what food you will eat will change and is already changing. And many of us already have experienced where we're going more into organic. We're going more into fruits and vegetables. We've started to go to a more natural diet, which does not require processing and does not, involve some other animal kingdom being, used as a food chain or anything of that nature. So a lot of that, the tastes and our connection to the food and the energies of the food is changing. So as we go into more organic 3D and organic 5D, the dependency on food and also the type of food that we consume. So realistically, the amount of food that we will eat will reduce, and to a point where you don't have to, but it will be more of a delicacy. But we won't build an environment like we did now. We build a world around food. We connect with friends with food. We celebrate with food. We are in flourishing or survival with food. We use food and we use it to create certain elevation within our experience, and also de-elevation in our experience. We choose to challenge our physicality with it. We also see that food at times is an addiction, so that it actually runs us. And so there's so much going on when it comes to food, which we are purging already. Okay, and many of us have purged quite a bit of it, and more as we go into it. Our reliance and connection to it, our representation of food, will no longer be part of our system. But the moment you sit down and you pick an orange and you want to eat an orange or any type of fruit, you're going to have a very sensorial experience, very intimate sensorial experience, because the plant will offer its energies, its consciousness, its wares or whatever, that you will feel more holistic once you're in that state. Right now, most of the food, we're starting to get more sensitive because we're starting to feel the food and the vibration of the food and the offering of the food. But when we get to more of our true design, which was the original design, it's going to be much more intimate in that regards. So that's that part of it. I think we've covered everything. There was one other little topic I wanted to cover, but it has slipped my mind. So I guess when it does have to come back. I mean, my soul is not bringing it back up again. So it's I guess it's saying, okay, it's enough, saturation time. Please use the opportunity to replay this several times because you'll get more and more. The understanding is every time you are exposed to this, it really activates that knowing, the codes, the stuff that you have within you. Okay? The one thing I wanted to mention, I just remember part of it, when we were, the first 5,000 years, we were crystalline, and then at this point, our body structure was changed to be able to work where we became more carbonic. The difference between the two is, like I said earlier, the crystalline carries much more information. So to go to carbon-based, it was restricting the frequencies, the codes that we could carry within our physical essence, so that we would not be receptive to feel the energies that would be coming in through our solar system and through our galaxy and our universe. So it actually created a limitation of how much frequency we can hold and how much light or spectrums of light we can hold. And that's why the carbon was brought in. So the transformation to crystalline again is to be able for the body to receive more of those codes and be able to activate itself back to more of its original design and beyond, or what you can call upgraded. So like I said, there's lots here. Repeat it, learn it, experience it, and what that does, it changes something within you. So with the several episodes that we talked about, it gives you a better feel that, yeah, we're not here just what we've believed up to this point in time. It opens up your mind to express and experience things more. It helps you to adjust the way you see things within your reality. So all of that is changing within you. So this information is coming now because you're more ready. Since the last changeover that we had the end of December going into January, and of course we had to wait until about the middle of January before the full 2020 frequency would come in, and then we had some other stimulations that kind of prepared us, and February that we're in now, we're coming closer to the end of it, you know, it was really packed with pulses, so we may have felt a lot of intensities coming through us at different points to really stimulate us in a big way to create part of that transformation, which is basically reactivating a lot of our natural. So when we're looking at it, whatever we've experienced at this point in time was not our true human nature. And anything that reflects that the human nature is one way or another is not. Our human nature is very, very different. And we're starting to feel that. We're starting to experience that. We're starting to bring that back online within ourselves. So as much as we are back online with the organic and offline with the inverted, we're now still very cautious or very restrictive of how much we bring in at once, because, you know, we have to go through the processing transmuting part within ourselves. To have an influx of that coming into our operating system would be a bit of a shock, because we've been living a very small compartmentalized life and separation and so forth. Now it's like, okay, we're starting to open things up. We're starting to see what else we can do here at this point. So that's why it's going in that fashion. Anyways, please take the time to re-listen to it. Please share of any comments and things that you would like us to cover, which we have tons to cover anyways, but our next episode is going to be this coming Thursday. And we may play with some questions that are still in alignment with what we've talked about in the episodes. And then we'll just carry on with more of the topics that we have already planned for the episodes along the way. So yes, through info@francodenicola.com as the email, but we can you can post those comments on Vimeo. You can post it on YouTube. You can post it on Facebook on all three pages. My regular page, my public page, and also Advancing Consciousness Series page, which is a group page. So you can, look for it. It's Advancing Consciousness Series, and that's a group. And you just ask to join, and you can join. The reason the group page was put together so that all the videos of the different topics are just there. You can't post, you can comment, you can share from there, you can do a lot of things there, but you can't post anything yourself because no one's posting. I'm only putting in these recordings, these live streams there, so that it's easy to just see them, and they're going to be dated along the way so that you can go through it much more easily, because our timelines on Facebook tends to spread out, and if you have more postings in between, when you're trying to find, you have to scroll through the history, and it takes you forever. So the group is very organized. Same thing with Vimeo and YouTube. There's a specific channel. Both of the channels are called Advancing Consciousness Series. That's on YouTube and Facebook, and that's all that will have these particular videos on the series. Was there anything else that I missed out on? We do ask for your support, so if you'd feel guided to contribute, to support, for us to be able to continue to bring this, we welcome it. The more you share it, the more you comment, the more you subscribe and so forth, you'll get the notifications, and it goes farther and wider. So that way that more and more people will participate in the transformation that we're going through. Anything else that we need to cover? We're good?
You covered the questions?
I covered the questions, yes. Was there anything else that we wanted to?
No, just that we're going to take some of the questions that were sent in to info and look at them and decide to pick a few that you can talk about on Thursday.
Okay, so if anybody is listening to us for the first time or hasn't been exposed to Kimberly, Kimberly is my partner, and she is the one that manages all the details and looks after the questions, comments, and so forth. Well, I stand up here and just talk away. So she does all the monitoring and also the posting and everything else. So we both have our part in this. It would be very difficult to do it alone. There might be some occasions that there'll be times that she won't be around and I will have to do it alone. But at this point, while she's here, she's supporting. So anyways, until next time, we will go out and play and enjoy this part of the experience that we're in today. Because right now, it's a new moment and a new chapter, and let's go out there and play. Thank you.